So Job is actually, if you didn't already know this, the oldest book of the Bible. It's even older than Genesis. Genesis talks about things that happened before Job, but Job is actually the oldest book. Job was a real person. He was actually mentioned in Ezekiel, proving that he was a real man. And if you wanted to kind of put a timestamp on it, Job was written somewhere around after chapter 11 of Genesis, about the time of Abraham. He would have been alive when Abraham was alive, more than likely. A couple of tip-offs to this is Job would have been, if you do the math, he would have been almost 200 years old when he died. If you do the math, he had we're fixing to read how many kids. He had several kids, and they were all grown, so he was probably around 50 or 60. And then it says he lived to be 100 and some odd years old. I can't remember exactly, but I done the math. It would have been 190, 175 years old. Abraham lived to be almost 200 years old. So you do the math, and as time goes by, the shorter the lives get. So he would have been right up there with the patriarchs, the time of the patriarchs. So keep that in mind as we read. There's over 100 words that is used in Job that is not used anywhere else in the Old Testament. Job is actually part of poetry, if you will. Like the first few chapters is a story, and then Job gets into a debate with his friends, and it becomes poetry at that time. It's just like Psalms and all that. There's several poetry books in the Bible. So it has been known that Job is one of the oldest books ever documented still on earth today. So, and it's one of the books that, as far as poetry goes, one of the most beautiful books ever known to man. So, we're probably going to skip the poetry side of it. We're going to kind of shuffle through it because it's like 20 some odd chapters of just him and Job and three of his buddies going back and forth. It gets pretty redundant. So we'll read some of it, but we're going to kind of jump over some of it because I don't want to lose none of y'all through the cracks, because it's going to get boring if I go word for word through the whole thing. But I want to stay as far as I can word for word as I can without getting too redundant. So one of the main things I've always thought about Job was it answers the question of good things happen or bad things happen to good people. And I've always understood it as, bad thing. The sun shines on the just and the unjust, and the rain falls on the just and the unjust. And Job's one of the books that prove that. Because Job was upright. It didn't say he was sinless, but he's an upright man. When you read that, it means that if he did sin, he would, make preparations for the sin. He was an upright man. He worried about what God thought about him, and he was scared of God. He was a good, godly man. It don't mean that he was perfect like Jesus was. Just think about that. When you read that, some of the commentators say he was sinless. It wasn't that he was sinless. If he was sinless, we wouldn't have needed Jesus. Okay, so I'm just trying to fill you in on some of the gaps before we start reading. In Ezekiel chapter 14, verse 14 through 20, it'll tell you a little bit about Job. It'll tell you that he was a real man. So I think we're going to get into it. Any questions about Job before we get into it? Anything you ever wondered about it before we get dove in too much? There's an underlying lesson in Job that is unteachable. I won't be able to teach it to you. Only God will be able to teach it to you. But the whole question is, why did something happen to me? Why? And Job goes into it. He says, I shouldn't have been born. I wish I'd never been born, and all this stuff. Why is this happening? And this and that. It's, if you ever ask yourself why, is this happening to me? By the time we get to the end of this book, you ought to know why. And the answer that it's going to give you is not going to be the answer you want. All right, we're going to start in chapter 1. There was a man in the land of Uz, whose name was Job. And that man was perfect and upright, and one that feared God and escheweth evil. Okay, the Uz, if you go back into the Old Testament, I think you'd have to go, I think you'd have to go to Genesis. Abraham's descendants, one of them's name was Uz. The guy that's name was Uz, or whatever it was that his name was, probably settled there, and that land was named after him. So, nobody knows where the land was. I heard some of the commentaries say it was somewhere around Syria, what we would call Syria today. It's irrelevant, really. So,
Arabian Peninsula.
Nobody really knows, though. It's disputable. So, you can guess. We could throw guesses at it all day. It's really irrelevant. All I know is there was a famous wizard there, and there was a yellow brick road that went down the middle of it.
It was over there.
So it said he was perfect and upright. That don't mean he was sinless. That just means when he messed up, he done the burnt offerings and repented for his sins and asked for forgiveness and all that good stuff. It don't mean he was sinless. Some of the things says he's sinless, but my thoughts is if he was sinless, we wouldn't have needed Jesus. So, and he escheweth evil. That means he resisted evil, or he shied away from doing evil things or anything that was evil. He didn't want nothing to do with it.
Well, I'm glad you're doing this book. I could do it because I read it, 2 or 3 times. Really...
Reading this book is discouraging because you get through chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3 is fine, but the 4 through 40, my goodness, it is redundant. It's grueling to read. That's part of that poetry. And poetry in this day ain't like poetry we have now, rhyme and rhythm, and it rhymes and sounds good. Their poetry was contrast and comparing, like just saying God is good and the devil's bad. It would be a contrast and comparing thing. It would say, you'll see what I'm talking about. It would say something and then say it again. You've read it in the Bible before. The poetry there, it's not like poetry as we think of it. Their poetry was real beautiful if you kind of really know what you're looking for and know how it's done. We'll carry on though. So he resisted evil, pretty much. Verse 2, and there were born unto him 7 sons and 3 daughters. That sounds pretty even, don't it? It's going to start listing out all this stuff because it's going to tell you how blessed that he is. It's going to explain how blessed it, and to have all this stuff means that God has blessed you in a great way. So 3, his substance also was 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen. And I looked it up. Usually a yoke of oxen would be 2 oxen, so that's 1,000 oxen. And 500 she-asses, and a very great household, so that this man was the greatest of all the men in the east. So he's extremely rich, and back then, they didn't really have money. So when you had things like, as far as animals go, it was worth money. I mean, you had a lot. Just for instance, the sheep, that was food. You could trade them for anything. The camels were actually one of the most used animals there. They were like one of the most sought after things. And the fact that he had 3,000 of them probably meant that he had some sort of transport business. He would load all of them down, have a caravan. You could take a bunch of stuff from place to place. You see what I'm saying? It would be like having It'd be like having a trucking company in your backyard. The oxen, you know, and the thing about where he lived, if it was in Syria, there's desert, but there's also green land where you could work the fields and stuff and actually plant and do, you know, harvest food and whatnot. So the oxen would have been used for that. That'd have been like having a bunch of tractors. And the she-asses, the female donkeys, the milk from a donkey was a delicacy. It was worth a lot. You know, and the very great household, that just means he had a lot of servants and people that helped him, actually, not necessarily family members, but, you know, a lot of servants and people to help him with the fields and with all of his stuff. You know, one man can't take care of all that stuff, so he had a lot of people that helped him. And he said he was the greatest of all men in the East, so he was a rich man. And there's nothing wrong with being rich. We talked about it last week. Being rich is awesome, as long as you know where you got it from and who deserves the glory for it, and you help the people out with it. It's the love of wanting to be rich is what makes it the bad thing. So, you know, being rich ain't nothing wrong with it. Abraham was one of the richest people. Moses was rich. There was a lot of rich people that was in the Old Testament. Was it Moses? Yeah, Moses was rich. Wasn't he a pharaoh?
Yeah.
Yeah. 4, and his sons went and feasted in their houses every one his day, and sent and called for their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. They're probably referring to birthdays, maybe more than that, but it insinuates that they would party. And this would probably be drinking alcohol, partying, you know, whatever. Eating, gluttony, overeating, just being wild. And he would call in the sisters, and that's probably wives and husbands, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? It's like family getting together, having a party. 5, and it was so. When the days of the feasting were gone about, that Job sent and sanctified them, and rose up early in the morning, and offered burnt offerings according to the numbers of them all. For Job said, it may be that my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. Thus did Job continually. There's a lot of points I want to make in that. Maybe I'll make them all. For one, this is before Moses. You got to remember, Moses is the one that led them out, and Moses is the one that gave them the 10 Commandments. So this is before Moses. This is before priest. So Job was his own priest. He was the father of the priestly whatever, and he would take care of the family and do the offerings for the family, or for, you know, he was the in-house priest for his family. That's one of the other reasons that they date this book so far back to where Abraham, back where the patriarchs, the old stuff. I think it was 2000 BC is when this book was dated. That's like 4,000 years ago, ain't it?
Yep.
That's a long time. So, what did Job do? How many of us have got kids and prays for their kids and actually goes and does for their kids? This would be like us praying for our kids. We'd wake up and we pray for our kids, but just think if you had to go out and sacrifice 7 oxen and fillet them out and burn their fat and hang them up, and it would be exhausting. Every time you thought that they had sinned, you would do that. It says he continually done this. It would be exhausting. It's awesome to have the ability to go to God through Jesus and not have to do this, sacrificing business. And this was before there was a temple and all that stuff set up. Remember that. I guess that's all the points. I might back up and go back to another point. I can't remember now. I don't write nothing down, so I don't know. And then we're going to kind of shift gears a little bit. 6. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them. Anytime you see this, you can underline it, sons of God. It is referring to angels in the Old Testament. Now, whether they were bad angels or good angels, probably heavenly angels, the good angels. And this was what Paul in the New Testament calls the heavenlies. That was that word used for what they're talking about here. This is in heaven. And the little rascal Satan is with them.
That's what I talk about in Jude.
Jude 2, Satan being with them in heaven.
The casting out of the sons of God.
Oh, yeah. They casted out angels. Yeah. So Satan's, he's able to go in and out of heaven. We're fixing to see that. 7, and the Lord said unto Satan, Whence comest thou, or where you come from? Then Satan said, or answered the Lord, and said, From going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. He said, I've been just cruising around on earth and, just scoping things out. And why? Why does God allow Satan to do that? Go in and out, in and from and to earth, just in and out. Why don't he just say, boom, you're dead. You're not allowed here no more. Why does he do that?
Because Satan has dominion over the earth.
Yeah, I have no idea. That was just a rhetorical question. That's to get your gears going. I don't think there's an answer. I do know why he allows things to happen, and we're going to talk about it some here in a minute. So Satan told him, I've been up and down through the earth, from the earth here, scoping things out. 8. And the Lord said unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil? And this word considered is actually a military term for kind of like a sniper scoping out a city. You're studying them, how to take it over. If you send in spies into a town to kind of scope it out, figure out how to take it over. That's what Satan does to us. He's scoping us out. He does it to him, he's doing it to us. He is scoping out, he's got people listening to every word. He is figuring your brain out, figuring out where your weak spots are, and that's where he's going to hit you. and he said, Have you considered my servant Job? And he asked the devil that. Have you considered my servant Job? I bet you Job don't see this part, okay? Job just feels the effects from it. I bet you Job is like, gee, thanks, Verse 9, Then Satan answered the Lord and said, Does Job fear you for naught? He's saying, does Job fear you for nothing? I mean, think about it. Why does he fear you? Why do you fear God? Is it because he gives you something, or is it because he can attack you? Or, think about that. And this is what he says. 10, Hast not thou made a hedge about him, and about his house, and about all that he hath on every side? Thou hast blessed the work of his hands, and his substance is increased in the land. He said, you know what? And this is the thing. Satan's saying to God, hey, you know what? Job's only loves you because you're blessing him. And this is all it boils down to. You know what? If you'll take all his blessings away, and we're finna see that, if you'll take all his blessings away, he ain't gonna love you no more. That's kind of the accusation that he's making. And the word Satan actually means accuser. So he's making accusations against Job against God. Have you seen how Satan worked in the garden? Satan said to Eve, he said, you know what? You can eat this fruit. It's not going to kill you. You know, God, I can't remember how it was worded exactly. It's not going to kill you. God wants you to be smart. He kind of enticed her with the fruit. And now he's saying, you know what? You know, Job's gonna curse you to your face if you'll just take everything he's got. And that's how it works. He tried to do it to God, and God, you know, makes a point out of him. So he's saying you blessed him. 11. But put forth thine hand now, and touch all that he hath, and he will curse thee to thy face. He's saying, you know what? If you take everything he's got, he'll curse you to your face. He only loves you because you give him stuff. He's a mercenary at that. You know, that's what a mercenary is.
This is all Satan saying.
This is Satan saying this to God about Job. He's saying, if you'll take all this stuff from Job, he's going to curse you to your face. He only loves you because you bless him. That's like I guess if a rich man was dating a young woman, you know, she only's after him for his money. That kind of a deal. Yeah, well, I mean, that's similar. You know, Job only loves God because he's blessing him. He's got all this earthly stuff. And we'll see that's not the case. I mean, you know, Satan's trying to trick God into letting him kill Job or whatever. But 12. And the Lord said unto Satan, behold, all that he hath is in thy power. Only upon himself put not forth thine hand. So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord. Did I say all that right? In other words, he says, you know what? I give you everything that he's got, but don't touch him. You can't touch him. You are dominion over everything. He lets the hedge down. You know, we always ask for that hedge of protection. It just said, you know, you got a hedge around Job. I can't touch him. But, you know, God takes the hedge down a little bit and says, you know, touch whatever. I mean, you can have everything he's got. Just don't touch him. And I think it's wild that, you know, Satan actually has to follow by the rules. Is that weird? Satan has to follow by what God says. He can only do so much. He could take, and he pushes it all the way to the limit. He takes everything Job's got, except for his wife. We'll see why in a minute. Takes everything Job's got, pushes it all the way to the edge, but don't touch Job. He'll curse you to your face. And he where was I at? 12? And the Lord's, I read all that, didn't I?
13.
So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord. We're fixing to move to verse 13, and it's afflictions of Job. We're subject to have a bad day every now and again, but Job finna have a bad day. It makes me just, I'm like, man, you know what? My back hurts. My back hurts, but it ain't none compared to Job. I'm doing good. At 13, and there was a day when his sons and his daughters were eating and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house. And there came a messenger unto Job, and said, the oxen were plowing, and the asses feeding beside them, and the Sabaeans fell upon them, and took them away. Yea, they have slain the servants with the edge of the sword, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. He's saying, you know what? The Sabaeans came and took all of our animals and slayed all this, killed all the workers with a sword, and I'm the only one that escaped. We don't have any more animals left. We got all of our oxen and the mean donkeys. I hate donkeys. And while he was yet speaking, probably out of breath, panting. All this just happened, Job. While he was yet speaking, there came also another, probably running up panting, and said, Their fire from God is fallen from heaven, and hath burned up the sheep and the servants, and consumed them, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. That was 2,000 sheep, wasn't it? That was a major fire. But look at this. This is how we talk, earthly. Fire from God. Now, we always want to accuse God for things not going the right way, but God didn't do it. Satan did it. Does that make sense? God let the hedge down a little bit, but Satan's the one that done it. So when things are going bad, don't blame God. Don't say, oh God, why are you doing this? Just remember, that Satan is the one that is like a roaring lion that is just waiting to devour who he can. You got to remember that. So all the sheep are gone, and all the men that was associated with the sheep, that helped the sheep or used the sheep or took them or looked after them, except for that one guy that coming was a messenger, which may or may not have been part of his clan. It could have been some other guy that just seen it happen. 17, while he was yet speaking, and you got to think these guys done run across half the country running over there, probably sweating and trying to catch their breath, and ain't neither one of them got done talking yet, one after another. While he is explaining this, the other one is telling. This guy's still talking. This guy's talking on top of this guy, and this guy comes up talking on top of this guy. He's like, trying to listen to all of them at once here. While he was yet speaking, there came also another, and said, The Chaldeans made out 3 bands, and fell upon the camels, and have carried them away, yea, and slain the servants with the edge of a sword, and only I am escaped alone to tell thee. Again, a different set of people. The Chaldeans come and stole all the camels. The camels were the most expensive animals, probably. They were probably worth a lot of money. And there wasn't really money, but they were valuable in that day. So remember, for the reasons we talked about earlier. While he was yet speaking, verse 18. This is on top of the other 3 that are speaking. There also came, or also another, and said, Thy sons and thy daughters were eating and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house. And behold, there came a great wind from the wilderness, and smote the 4 corners of the house, and it fell upon the young men, and they all dead. They are dead, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's all of his children. And this messenger is the one that came. I only am escaped alone to tell thee. Now, all of this just happened. This is like the worst thing ever. This is your house burning down, your family getting a car wreck and all of them dying, and where you work just burnt down, and your tractor just burnt to the ground with the barn. This is everything you've got is essentially gone. This is called rock bottom. Definitely. With a capital R. But look how Job does it. 20, Then Job arose and rent his mantle and shaved his head, and fell down upon the ground and worshipped, and said, Naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return thither. The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In all this Job sinned not, nor charged God foolishly. How many of us get all bent out of shape when things go bad, and you don't look at it in the way that, God gave it to you, it's His to begin with, Things that you have do not belong to you, especially your wife and your kids. They are not yours. You wanna claim them, but they essentially belong to God. And He wants to take them, He will. Point blank. It's just the way it is. The thing you got to remember is His ways are not your ways. In the end, Job will be replenished times 2. He will be, I'm sure he misses his other kids, but everything will be restored, essentially. We want to curse God and, fall down and say, why is this happening to me? Why did God do this to me? Just remember, your ways ain't God's ways. And we're going to get real in depth into that in a little while, and maybe next week. But I think we're going to keep going. I think we're going to keep going into chapter 2. And the way that he words this, naked I came out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. I think that he was just to the point of just giving up right then. I'm done. I'm just, because it insinuates that he's going to die with nothing. So I don't know if he's planning on dying right then, or if he's planning on never getting anything back, ever. I don't know, but you got to remember that. The things in this world don't belong to you. And if you put earthly things ahead of God, He's liable to take them anyway. So, we're going to move to chapter 2. We're going to talk about this a little bit. I want to see how far we get. What time is it? Yeah. Again, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them to present himself before the Lord. This is round 2, all right? This is the same thing that happened. The angels are in heaven, got Satan with them, and they go to God, and God is going to say, and the Lord said unto Satan, from whence comest thou? And Satan again answered, Satan answering, I said again, I'm sorry. The Lord answered the Lord and said, from going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. And the Lord said unto Satan, hast thou considered my servant Job? And by this time, when Job got to heaven and was talking to God, I'm pretty sure he's like, gee, thanks. Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil. And still he holdeth fast his integrity, although thou movest me against him to destroy without cause. He said, although there was no reason to mess with Job, he still has not cursed me to my face. In other words. And Satan answered. Satan's trying to get the rules changed now. Answered the Lord and said, skin for skin, yea, all that a man hath will he give for his life. But put forth thine hand now, and will curse thee to thy face. I'm sorry, I skipped some. And touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse thee to thy face. He's saying, you know what? When this is the most desperate a person can get. If it's life and death, if your life is in danger, you will do some major stuff. You will kill another person if you're in fear of your life. I tell you what, you touch Job, you skin for skin, he's gonna get desperate, he's gonna start cursing you, God. I'm telling you, he's not the man you think he is. Let me touch it, let me touch him. Let me get a hold of him. I'll show you what kind of man that Job is. And he says, you know what? We'll read it. And the Lord said unto Satan, behold, he is in thine hand, but save his life. He goes, you know what? I'll give him to you, but don't kill him. So went Satan forth from the presence of the Lord and smote Job with sore boils from the sole of his foot unto to his crown. That's from head to toe with boils. I don't know what boils are, but it sounds terrible.
It is like,
Big pus.
Right.
Big pus bubbles.
Yeah.
I don't know. All the commentators, more taters are more common than others, but all of them say different stuff. So I don't know what it was, but it sounds terrible. So he hit him with boils all from head to toe, pretty much is what it means. And this is verse 8, and he took him a potsherd. It's a broken piece of pottery to scrape himself withal. And he sat down among the ashes. And this was a practice. You would sit in ashes, it would help, it was like medicine. But he took a piece of broken pottery to scrape the bulls and to pop them and to get them, the pus and stuff out of them. But history tells me, if you do a little bit of history on it, if it was like it was in the days of Jesus, if you had some junk like this going on, they'd put you on the outskirts. You couldn't be around other people. So he was out by himself. So he's scraping his bulls with a broken piece of pottery. And, we're finna read. Then said his wife, and this is why the devil didn't take his wife, okay? Then said his wife unto him, doest thou still retain thy integrity? Curse God and die. Now, I don't know.
She was against God.
She wasn't necessarily against God, but I think she was tired of seeing Job suffer.
Right.
So, curse God and die. Because if you ever tell God that, say, God, why are you doing this? Or whatever, he's going to strike you down. He's saying, curse him and just get it over with. Die. And the language it's written in was curse God and bless God. So, and it was wrote in such a way to where it was sarcasm. So it wouldn't have made sense to say curse God and bless God. It had to be, the sarcasm part of it had to come out. So she said curse God and die. So it would be more like bless God and die is what she said to him. But their writing is weird. There's so many words, so many different words, but like the indication of the word could be the opposite of the word if it was said a certain way, and that's what it meant, curse God and die. Kind of like we do. We'll say a certain word, but it means the exact opposite because we're being a smart aleck about it. That was kind of what this was. And he said, 10, but he said unto her, thou speakest as one of the foolish women speaketh. He didn't say, look, in all this, he was smart, okay? He didn't call her a fool. He said, you speaking like a foolish woman. He didn't say you being a fool woman. I thought that was funny. I'm the only one that caught that, I guess.
No.
I thought that was funny. That'd be like, hey, you quit being stupid. It's like, hey, quit being like a person that is stupid. I don't know. But I thought that was funny how he answered that. He said, you're speaking like a foolish woman. What? Shall we receive good at the hand of God, and shall we not receive evil? In all this did not Job sin with his lips? It said with his lips. I don't know what he was thinking.
He didn't confess out loud.
So, think about that a minute. Do you really realize how spiritually weak we are when things are going good? Think about that. If God's blessing you, do you wake up and say, man, this is such a great day that God's given me. I thank you for the stuff that I have. I thank you for my car. I thank you for my kids. I thank you how, healthy we all are. I thank you for the money, the little bit of money you give us to help us. I thank you for the food. When things are going good, you ain't talking to God, most likely, or not really spending a whole lot of time talking to God. But when things are going terrible, boy, we'll talk to Him all day long. Will you please look after the kids? The kids are having a hard day. My back hurts. I'm finna go to work. Will you look after me at work? Will you make things go right at work? Because everything goes wrong at work. When things are going wrong, we got a connection with God. We talking to Him. Things are going right. You are spiritually weak. You got to keep that in mind. It says, do we not? I'm going to read it again. Shall we receive good at the hand of God, and shall we not receive evil? That's what that says to me.
Well, in this it said Job recognized that God is in control of every life, whether of good or of evil time.
When things are going bad or good, it's in His will. He's not necessarily the one doing it, but He willed it.
Yeah, that's what He
allowed it to happen. And here's the biggest question. Why does He allow stuff like that to happen to us?
To test our strength.
It all boils down to love. He could have made us like robots, okay? He could have stamped us all out the same. We are robots. We worship one God. We love Him, and that's it. But love really hinges on a relationship. But why do you love Him? And this is why God allowed Job to go through this stuff. If Satan took everything Job has and took his life to where he was just miserable, and he still loved God. He chose to love God whether he was blessed or not blessed. And if you can do that, it shows God that you love Him. And He created you because He loves you. He sent His Son because He loves you. And He wants to be loved back. How does He know you love Him if you've never went through a hard time? Like here lately, Elizabeth will make Lily mad, and Lily will say, I hate you 50 times in a row for 5 minutes. It's because she ain't getting her way. We are just like that. We don't get our way. So we are like, God, why are you doing this? God, it's the same thing. In her heart, she really does love her mom, but are you going to show it? Are you really just scared of God? Or are you loving Him because He is blessing you? You got to remember, things happen in our life. It is what it is. But we have something better to look forward to. This lifetime is a vapor. It is a little speck on a timeline. And when we get to heaven, we can look back at this speck and be like, man, that was so long ago. That was so petty. Why did I let that one particular thing drag me down? Why did I let the devils, trick me into doing this? Why couldn't I have eschewed evil? In other words. And we make life so much harder on ourselves than it needs to be. How much more time do we got? We got 10 more minutes. And I say that the devil kind of spared his wife because his wife was going to help him out some. Just curse God and die. Curse God and die. And that's what essentially the devil want to do, is kill him. That's what the devil wants to do to all of us. He wants to kill us. He is so jealous of us, the devil is. We're fixing to meet Job's friends. With friends like these, you don't need enemies. I'm telling you. Job's friends were actually very sincere and courteous and really good friends. But the mindset that they had are just like the mindsets that we have sometimes. When things are going good, you've been doing good. But when things are going bad, God is cursing you because you ain't been acting right. And that's kind of the mindset these friends have. But they're actually good friends because they go to Job. And if you get to studying, they probably had to make quite a hike to go sit with Job for 7 days and 7 nights without eating in a ash pile while Job is probably smelling putrid by now, and just sit with him and wail and cry with him. And that's a pretty good friend to come sit with you for 7 days and just be sad with you. And that was the 7 days was the amount of time you would mourn. So 11. Now when Job's 3 friends heard of this evil that was come upon him, they came every one from his own place. Eliphaz the Temanite, and Baldad the Shumanite, and Zophar the Naamathite, for they had made an appointment to gather to come to mourn with him and to comfort him. Now me and Daryl had a discussion one day. I said the shortest man in the Bible was Nehemiah, but he pointed out that Baldad the Shuhite was the shortest guy.
Shuhite?
That was a joke. I heard somebody else tell. I got tickled with it. The Shuhite.
How do you pronounce that? Bildad?
Bildad, yeah.
Yeah.
Bildad the Shuhite. That wasn't my joke. I just thought it was cute. And when they lifted up their eyes afar off, they knew him not. They lifted up their voices and wept. So it's saying, I'm going to stop in the middle of the verse. They lifted up their eyes, and Job was in such bad shape that they didn't know who he was. And they lifted up their voices and wept, and they rent every one of their mantle. That just means they tore their clothes off, and sprinkled dust upon their heads toward heaven. So they looked up and sprinkled dust on themselves. And that was one of the ways that they would mourn. Seems a little weird to me, but that's just the way it was. So they sat down with him upon the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and none spake a word unto him, for they saw that his grief was very great. We could take a lesson from that, because a lot of times when we help somebody that is going through mourning, we open up our mouth, and sometimes it's better to be quiet than it is to talk, because a lot of times we put our foot right in our mouth or make things worse. Or
Especially men.
a lot of times all you do is just go sit with them and cry with them. I mean, you can't just pat them on the back and tell them it's going to be okay, and tell them that you're going to see them again, or whatever's going on. Sometimes it's just better to have, not say nothing and have company.
Sometimes just being there.
Just being there, so you ain't by yourself.
You ain't gotta say.
I don't know that I would sit outside in the ash heap for 7 days and 7 nights without any food with my buddy that just looked like he about to die. I don't know that I could do that. They're pretty good friends. They're just confused about what they believe in, I guess. Yeah. There's going to be a lot of questions that come up of why, and I should have never been born and all this stuff. And essentially at the end of the book, God rebukes them. It says, was you here the day that I done this? Was you there when I built this thing? And essentially I think what God is going to tell him is it ain't meant for you to know. And I heard one guy say if God was small enough to figure out, He would not be big enough to worship. That's pretty neat, ain't it?
If we knew everything, why would we need him?
Exactly. If He was small enough to figure out, He wouldn't be big enough to worship.
And there's a lot of things that's better